I was 17 years old, and because of my age, you could easily adapt to anything. And I wasn't happy, but I wasn't. I wasn't uncomfortable, but you roll with the punches.
Okay. Dust. Did you do activities? How bad was the dust?
Oh, it was terrible. As soon as I wash my hair, the dust comes, and I have to wash it again. And I wash it in the laundry room, and people would come back and say, "What are you doing?" It's obvious what I'm doing, but anyway, they're just being nice.
Okay, tell me about today.
Well, today's fine. Let's see. We travel a lot, and I have a daughter that lives back east, so we go back and forth. We used to drive, but now we're too old to do that. So this year we flew.
Why is the museum important?
Well, because it tells what happened to us, and it's preserving all this. And I think it's wonderful.
Why is it important that we know what happened?
A lot of people don't know what happened, and they are very shocked. So it's good to let it out. It could happen to anybody.
Anything else that you would like to add?
Well, I'm glad they're doing this, and the Topaz Museum has a lot to do preserving the history. And we hope that it would never happen to any group, ever.
I was 6 when the incarceration order came out, May of 1942.
What was that like?
Well, we were first taken to Tanfran, which was in Northern California. That's where the Northern California people were taken to Tanfran, which was a racetrack. It's a shopping center now, but it was a racetrack back then. And so they put us in horse stalls, and they had soldiers and guarding us. So we were kept there for about 6 months, from May to October. And I tell people the good news was it was during the summertime, so we could stay outside, but at night we had to go in, and there was one family to a horse stall. And I can remember that we didn't have mattresses. We had to stuff straw in these bags, and that's what we slept on. Until one day a truck came into the parking lot and had mattresses, but the mattresses were only about this thick, but it was better than the straw bags. And then in October they put us on trains, and I never understood this because they covered up the windows. And so somebody said, "How long did it?" I don't know. We couldn't tell night from day. But anyway, then we got here, and so this was more or less where my childhood began, because I didn't remember much of my childhood before we came to camp. But so for the next 3 years, I played with children other than my brothers and sisters, and my first Christmas was here. We would have Christmas parties in the mess hall, and I remember they had built a big cardboard fireplace in front of the mess hall window, and Japanese Santa would crawl in through the window and come out and start passing gifts out to the children. And my first gift was a little stuffed gray elephant. So that was more or less how my childhood began in the camps.
So was it dusty?
Oh yes. See, the problem was the barracks were in such a hurry to build these barracks that they used green lumber. You know what green lumber is? Well, as soon as they put them up, then within a matter of time, they shrunk, right? So there was always a space about an inch wide between each plank, and the only thing on the outside was tar paper. So when it got dusty and things, in this area, there was all this white sand. It wasn't like desert sand, it was like white sand. So this must have been a lake or something thousands of years ago, because if you ran your hand through the sand, you would come up with a handful of shells, seashells. And so the women would make little pins and necklaces out of those shells. So anyway, the sand or dust would get all over the room because you couldn't keep it out. So we were constantly dusting the place. Well, for us kids, the biggest challenge was always looking for some place to play because the rooms were too crowded. There were 9 in my family, and so the rooms were always crowded. So the biggest challenge we had was, especially in the wintertime when the grounds were covered with snow, or we had to find other places to play. And one of our favorite was the laundry room, because the laundry room was open and we would crawl around on the beams. So, but for our folks, the problem was, and you have to understand the Japanese culture, my folks were from Japan, and so you didn't discuss problems with your folks. I mean, the care and feeding and raising of the children was just up to the mother. The father took no part in that. And so their feelings about the incarceration, we never found out. Never. Okay, even after we got out, nobody discussed the camp. We frankly were ashamed of it, and we wanted to just forget it. And it's just in the last few years that, we have gotten around to start. I'm a docent at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, and so I am now comfortable with talking about it. But for many, many years, none of us, and there were 9 in my family, 7 children, none of us ever discussed it. It was just something I guess we wanted to forget. Now, I had been here, came over here with my family for the groundbreaking ceremony many years ago, but I hadn't been back, and so I had sent things to Jane, pictures and so forth, so I don't know if she put them up, but yeah, the Topaz was a real important part because it left a lot of it had a major impact on what happened to me eventually, so how I viewed myself, and because it took, when we got out, we moved here to Salt Lake City, and because my father knew a Japanese family living in Salt Lake, so with a $25 and a bus ticket, we settled in Salt Lake City. And so for the first few years in Salt Lake was very difficult because we didn't have any money. My father got a job as a dishwasher in a little Mexican restaurant. So, and then my mother left us, took my younger sister, and they went to California, Los Angeles. Anyway, it was quite a while before we could I don't know what you might call it, more of a reasonable life. I stayed here till I graduated from high school, but when all my siblings came out or went out to California. So anyway, that was more or less how the camp had impacted our family.
Well, it was kind of hard. It's very hard because it was under the crudest conditions. She wasn't born very healthy, so I had a hard time with her. But she was born in 1943.
Okay. So 2 years in the camp?
I was in altogether 3 years because I was in Tanforan before I went into Topaz.
What is it like here today?
Today, it's so different. Even the things that they display are displayed so clean and neat that it's unbelievable that, you know, it's so clean. Well, in Topaz, everything was so dusty because of the sandstorms, and so continuously it was dusty. And why is it important that I'm here? Well,
The museum is here.
I'm 97 years old, and I figure this is my last chance to see what people are looking at today. And so I thought I'd just come to say hello and goodbye to everything, all my old memories. They're all bad memories, but they're memories.
Could this ever happen again?
I think it's beginning to happen. It looks like the beginning of the same thing that happened to us, and so I hope it doesn't happen, but it looks to me like it's starting to happen again, unless people come and see how the things that did happen can happen again.
Are you teaching them today?
Well, that's why they're here. That's why they're with me, so I could tell them exactly how it was in camp. I hope it doesn't happen to them or to their generation or to their children.
Where do you live now?
I live in Berkeley, California.
Anything else that you would like to add? Is there anything else you want to say?
No, except that I hope it doesn't happen again. God forbid.
I was 4 years old when I went to Topaz. I was 8 when we left.
It doesn't seem like too bad an age.
Yeah.
Was it tough? I mean, how was it on the family?
That's a good question. My mother divorced our father with 5 children, 5 Saitos. We were all born in San Francisco. And between Tanforan and Topaz, my mother separated from our father. So when we got to Topaz, you know, we were fatherless. My mother with 5 children. The youngest is about 8 months. My oldest sister was 12. I was 4. I turned 5 my birthday is December 11th of 37, so I turned 5 in 42.
I've been talking with other people. Did a stigma follow you after the camp?
Oh, absolutely. Camp was easy compared to the afterlife. You know, when we had to assimilate back into white America, that's when the you-know-what hit the fan. And we were called, in fact, you know, I was in the 3rd grade when we left Topaz. I went to the 1st grade in Topaz. And I didn't know what I was saying, but I was saluting the flag, right? With liberty and justice for all. I didn't know what I was saying. It was after camp that I realized our rights were violated, that we were in a prison camp. And but, you know, I was in the 3rd grade. And I was sitting in the back, and 3 of the kids, two boys, called me a dirty Jap. And a little white girl turned around and called me a dirty Jap. So I went up to the teacher. I was crying, and I said, "Those kids back there are calling me a dirty Jap." And the teacher bent down to me, and she said, "Well, you are, aren't you?" So that was my introduction to public education after camp, you know, and it was downhill from there, you know. So it was very unpopular to be of Japanese descent in white America. I was told that I killed so-and-so's uncle. I killed so-and-so's father in the South Pacific. We were blamed for everything. I was told to go back to Japan. I've never been to Japan. I was born in San Francisco. I have no desire to travel, mainly because of the camp experience, So it was not. I used to pray to God. I was a Christian back then. I used to pray to God every night and say, Lord, make me wake up with blonde hair and blue eyes, so I don't have to go through all this, this discrimination, this pain, this humiliation, and this disgraceful treatment that I was getting. I was a good kid. I tell people all the time, you don't see us on Judge Judy because we obey all laws, we're good citizens, but we weren't treated that way. So when we came out of camp, we couldn't rent an apartment. They wouldn't sell us a property. We couldn't get a job. It was really tough. It took us 10 years. My stepfather, who had adopted, he married my mother with 5 children. Then he had 3 of his own. So my stepfather, the only job he can get was a janitor. And so he had more dependents than income, so he never paid income. So it took us 10 years saving pennies to buy a house, our first house in Berkeley. And I'm still there. Well, I think the museum is important because it shows what could happen when people operate on their gut level, hatred and prejudice and bigotry, and they use this as a scapegoat, and we're the ones who suffered the consequences. Here we are, innocent people, right? Never committed a crime. We're good citizens. We worked hard, and yet we were treated this way. And it's interesting. To this day, I cannot recite I cannot say the Pledge of Allegiance because because at the end it says, "With justice, liberty, and justice for all." My friend says, "With liberty and justice for all, for them." It really has a profound effect on my life. I can't honestly say I'm a proud American because I went through what I did. It's so painful. I have a friend of mine who just died. He was the first professor at UC Berkeley, Paul Takagi. He used to pick me up for lunch on a regular basis. The first thing he would say when I jumped in his car, he would say, "Toru, I'm still pissed off about being put into the camp." And I said, "Me too, Paul. Let's go eat." That's how we started the day. So we were the 2 people who couldn't say, "Hey, it couldn't be helped," make excuses for the government. Huckety-duckety. No, that's bullshit. And I'm not going to sit here and talk that kind of, and make it seem like it's not. I'm going to tell it the way it is. If people don't want to listen to me, don't listen, but I can't be phony, you know what I mean?